Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Elisa Sklar. I am the VP of Marketing for GIS Planning, and I am delighted to have you here with us today. We are going to be tackling a really important topic, which is 5 specific strategies to drive traffic to your economic development website. Now, I share my webcam at the beginning because for those of us who are living in this Zoom GoToWebinar, Microsoft Teams world, this brand new normal, I like to have a face. So say hello to everybody. I'm now going to turn off my webcam so we can give primacy to the slide deck on its own because it's going to be full of information. Excellent. Okay, so from here, what I'd like to do then, I'm just going to move this over to the side of my screen, is we are going to get started taking a look at some of the really important things that you need to know about basically driving as much traffic as possible to your website. You've probably built a lovely website. It's probably full of information. Hopefully it's got some fantastic interactive data tools on it, but that is not the be all and end all. And I usually say that it's kind of the best metaphor for this is as if you threw a party but didn't send out any invitations. No one would show up to your party. We want to make sure that you get qualified traffic coming to your economic development website. And so that's really the goal of today's presentation. Just to give you an overview, these are some of the things I'm going to be talking about. First of all, a few words on how to understand your web traffic. So we'll talk very briefly about analytics. Then we're going to talk about the art and science of link placement, linking strategies. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about the power of images and video and interactive content. I'll explain some strategies for connecting with community stakeholders. We're going to talk about turning those stakeholders into ambassadors. I'll talk about building rapport with your local journalists, how to take advantage of free listings, and also how you can think about if you've got interactive data on your website, how to think of that as open data that you can promote to your community. Okay. Let's spend a few minutes there just understanding web traffic. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it is really important to understand because we really need to know our analytics. If we're going to put all this effort into this, we need to know that we can measure it. So if you have not yet gone into the Google Analytics for your website, now is the time to roll up your sleeves and get in there. And it's pretty intuitive. And the amazing thing about Google, of course, is that it is a user manual for everything. So if you don't understand what you're seeing in your Google Analytics, you can Google your questions. How do I understand my traffic sources? How do I know the difference between new and returning visitors? How can I make sense of what my landing pages are, my exit pages? And how do I make sense of the average time on site? So these are some of the really important things that you need to think about when you're looking at your analytics. So traffic sources is critical. If I have a client who comes to me and says, I want to know why I'm not getting more traffic, I say, okay, let's go into your analytics together. And I'll take a look at the traffic sources with them. And you know what I see 99% of the time is that there is no incoming traffic from social media. There's no incoming traffic from anywhere else but their own website or maybe the city or county website, and that they're not doing anything in email campaigns. They're not getting anything from any other sources. So when you look at your analytics, see where your traffic is coming from. If it's all direct, or maybe organic search, that tells you that you've got a lot of work that you can be doing on creative link placements. Now, new returning visitors, landing pages, we often think of our website, everyone comes in from the front door, which is the home page, but of course that's not true at all. We know, for example, that about 25% when our clients who are using our intelligence components, the standalone data tools, those can be up to 25% of their landing pages. They're really keyword rich. So when people are doing searches about demographics, let's say in, Hernando County or in Springfield, those are the things that are going to often show up in the Google search results. And that's where people are going to land into your website. So that's a good thing to look at. How much time are they spending on your site? If they're only spending a few seconds, then they got there by mistake, or else your website is not designed well enough in order to keep their attention while they're there. So these are some of the things you want to think about. And Google Analytics is really good at looking at this group behavior. When it comes to your data tools, we've added a couple of extra layers of analytics. So your Zoom Prospector Analytics, for example, will give you all the economic development data. What are the top community search? What are the top property reports being looked at? what reports are downloaded. Is it labor force? Is it business reports? Is it wage reports? Those kinds of things. And also, what are the things that people are most likely to search in terms of keywords, communities viewed, all that interesting stuff. The last layer of analytics is really important too. That's our lead gen ID. That's using lead forensics, reverse IP lookup. And that tells you what companies are on your website, not the people at the companies. You would know, for example, the GIS Planning had visited your website, but you wouldn't know if it was Elisa at GIS Planning. And that tells you also how people got there, but then what they're specifically looking at on your data tools, how long they spend there, how many times they return, where their office is, what their industry is, what their website is. It's not cookies. This is a different kind of thing. You can't see what else they're doing, but you get a chance to see what companies are visiting. And that's important, actionable intelligence that really gives you a competitive edge, because it's, especially in economic development, you can see what companies, businesses, site selectors are scouting this information. It's very useful to them. And in the end, they're happy, because if you reach out to them, let's say taking a customer service approach, I usually recommend something like, hello, I noticed that someone from GIS Planning has been doing some research on our website. I just want to make sure you found everything you're looking for. Is there anything I can help you with? So that way you avoid the creepiness factor, but you really kind of are letting them know that you're there to assist, and that you that's part of what you're tracking. A very important thing. And really, all savvy marketers are doing this these days, so this does not in any way come as a surprise to anyone. So web traffic, excellent. We've taken a look at that. Now let's dive into some strategies. The next thing I look at, if I have a client or someone says to me, I want to beef up the website, the traffic on my website, especially to my data tools, is that I will look at it and I'll say, okay, so what kind of language are you actually using when you are putting the links onto your data tools, for example? So that means you need to know who your target audience is. And if you look here on this slide, you'll see that I've come up with the 3 most common types of target audiences for an economic development or audience or chamber of commerce. The first one is site selectors or businesses making location decisions. The second one would be your existing businesses, of course, especially as we recover from this pandemic. We want to do everything we can to support our existing businesses. And the third one would be miscellaneous other community stakeholders. That can be elected officials, it can be journalists, it can be people in the public sector who are doing research, it can be your hospital administrators, it can be corporate real estate folks, all sorts of interesting stuff in there. Okay, so these are 3 rough audiences that we've isolated. Now let's think about the language that would appeal to each of them. So the first one we want to think about, let's take a look at site selectors here, is what is the descriptive language, and where would we put those links? So for a site selector, imagine, put that hat on your head and imagine you're going through a website. You would look for something called a property locator or site selection tool or site buildings database or site finder or location analysis tool. All of those would be the kinds of things as a business making a location decision that would attract your attention. Now notice the one thing you do not see here, you do not see anything that says GIS tool, unless you are a GIS data geek, and we respect them and love them and have a few of them right here in our own company. Those are not the folks who you're trying to attract with most of the data tools on your website, unless you really do have a specific GIS tool only for them. And that causes most people's eyes to glaze over. They think, well, I don't know anything about that. I don't have the training. I probably won't be able to use that. So I avoid that altogether. And I like to put the locations in multiple places around the website on the different pages. They should be in the headers and the footers. Those go on every single one of your pages. So for SEO purposes, that's critical. I usually like to have a block or a hero image or something dedicated at the top of a home page, because this is probably one of the most important things you're doing in economic development, is attracting new investment and new businesses relocating or expanding. Make sure that's something you put prominently at the top. Maybe you are an economic development department within a city or county site. That's okay too. There's usually a site selection page that's dedicated, or an economic development page dedicated. Put it there as well. Excellent. Now let's take a look at your business community. Now these folks, unless they are actually expanding or relocating, they're probably not going to click on something called a property locator. And that's really a shame if you're thinking of something like Zoom Prospector, because there's so much rich market intelligence and business intelligence in there, and they're not going to see it because they're not going to click on the Sites and Buildings database unless they're looking to move. So I like to have links back to the same tool, but I use different language in these places. I call it a business and location analysis tool. I call it business data resource, a business data portal, workforce and business data. And then I think about places around the website, in addition maybe to headers and footers, that would be places that your businesses would be looking, maybe in a Chamber of Commerce resources. Maybe you have an industry page. Maybe, as many of you do, you have a city or county doing business here page. Those would be excellent places to put them. I'm going to show you some examples in a moment, so stick with me here. Now, your third persona here, as they're traveling through your website, still important to you, is other community stakeholders. Now, again, if they're not moving at that moment, they are probably not going to click on something called a Sites and Buildings database. They might click on something called a business data resource, but they will definitely click on something called a community data mapping tool or a community data resource or open data tool. Suddenly, the data that's so robust and rich in something like Zoom Prospector or a demographics tool becomes much more interesting and accessible to them. It's still there, but they're not going to think of clicking on something called Sites and Buildings. And there's loads of other places across your website that you can put that in there. And give you some example of ways that different clients have been very strategic and creative in using these here. So this comes from the MEDC, Michigan Economic Development. And what they did is they prominently on their homepage, they have 4 different links that all go back to Zoom Prospector, but each time they go back to a specific filtered search that they have generated, and then they use our all-powerful share button, which I'll show you afterwards. It comes up with a link. You can use that link to create a hyperlink somewhere else on your website. So you can click on Redevelopment Ready and it will take you back to a filtered search in Zoom Prospector that shows you all of those sites. So if you are trying to draw attention to, let's say, certified properties or energy ready properties or things in your opportunity zones, this is a really tactical way to do that directly from the homepage. And that will drive that qualified traffic that is looking for that and bring them right back to it. So very creative. I really love that one. Now, here's another example from Florida. What they've done is, if you look at the top where the first yellow arrow is, on top of all of the Zoom Prospector tools, we've got property search, but there's also a community data tab. And that opens up, you can change the location, look at the whole county, look at a custom region, look at a specific city within there, and you get all of the same fantastic, robust reports, but this is community-based. It's not around commercial real estate here. And if you see in the lower arrow, when you click on share, it gives you that powerful link over there. And so what they did is they took that hyperlink and you can put that in the website and your community data tool, explore community data here, and it will bring you back to this page. Again, this is a great way to drive that really qualified traffic back there to explore all the interesting things about your county or your city or any of the regions that you are serving. So also really clever. Another great one, this one was is recently launched from Four Corners, New Mexico. And they're using the Compare Communities tab that you can see up here. That also exists on the top of all of our Zoom Prospector tools. And what they did was really clever. They built a Compare Communities. You can compare something in your service territory with as many places across the country as possible. And they figured that these were the 6 locations that were most often being compared. So they built this report. And then they clicked on share, they grabbed the hyperlink, and what they've done is they've put this in with a link from their homepage directly into their website. So right away, you can still do all the creative, you can delete some of those, add new locations if you want. But the nice thing that they did is they've made this part of the content of their website by directing people to a pre-built report. So kudos to them, that was a super clever thing to do. Another example here is linking directly to a business report. So we talked about your businesses and how they're not going to click on something called sites and buildings, but they will be interested in the ability to map out all of the business and industries, filter them down, search in within your service territory, because that's really useful information. You can map out suppliers, competitors, you can figure out your best location, you can look for new supply chain opportunities. So this is another way where you can open the business report. This is in the Our Community tab at the top. We open business. In this case, we're looking at the Port of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles tool. And if you click on share, it will give you that hyperlink, and you can now use that hyperlink to create a direct link from somewhere else on your website. Very clever, great way to direct your businesses right there where they can get all sorts of useful information they might not otherwise see. Okay, let's switch gears here. So the next tactic is to think about creatively engaging all of your community stakeholders. Your community's economic well-being affects everyone. We're all very keenly aware of this, especially as we come out of this pandemic. So let's show them how they can help by making them literally ambassadors to your community and empowering them to use the data that you're hosting on there in order to do that. So this requires just a little bit of homework from you and your team. The first thing that I suggest is you begin by compiling a list of all the contacts in other government and administrative departments in your service territory. Then put together a second list. All the journalists, media contacts in your area, and think broadly here, your online magazines, your business websites, your influential bloggers, anybody who's generating content about the economy, about business, about shipping, transportation, anything related to your region. The next list, and bear with me here, is develop a list of university, college, technical school librarians and departments in your area that would be interested in accessing your data. So that could be business, urban planning, poli-sci, sociology, management. This is the third list that you want to come up with. The next thing you do is you reach out separately to each of those lists to let them know how your data on the website is relevant to them. We have these interactive data tools. You can export, you can share, you can use this to do all of the things you need to do. Now, if you're elected officials in government, the things that you might be interested in are different than if you're a journalist or a media and you're looking to write and you want to bookmark these sites because they're super useful. Conversely, the librarians and universities will want to post this on their reference list so that their students and researchers, maybe they're hosting an SBDC or doing other kinds of business incubators, and that should be a reference that they're listing on their websites and their tools as well. The idea here is you want all of these to consider linking back to your website, and specifically if you have them to your interactive data tools. Now, you're probably saying, this doesn't necessarily make sense to you. You're thinking, why do I want to have my librarians do that? I'm gonna come to that in a minute, so bear with me here. This is really critical. It's doing that outreach, letting them know that this is open access data, letting them know that it's there. Oftentimes when I speak with clients, I'll find out, because we do training often for the people in their region, and people just had no idea that these resources exist for them. So we want to make sure that they are not hidden gems buried in the attic, and that everyone is able to take care of them. This is good for your SEO, and it will drive quality traffic to your website. So you want to encourage all of those stakeholders to link back to your website. As I said, there's a beautiful example here of New York State Empire State Development website with all of the different data tools. This is fantastic, robust, interactive, mobile friendly. They can save, they can share. It's just fantastic work. And what you want to do in that email is help them understand why it's specifically useful to them. So just some examples here. So if you're trying to reach elected officials, they're going to know that this is valuable open access data that their citizens can access, which is fantastic for research, business, accessibility, transparency. They can use that data for their reporting, for their proposals, for their speeches, for PR. The journalists will definitely want to use data on your website for their stories, and hopefully they will link back to your website in those stories. So follow up with them. If they publish something that uses data from your website, make sure that you go back to them afterwards and say, please, can you include a link back to the website, because that's super powerful. Now, your tourism folks, your health, administrators, school administrators, police, safety, public works, they can also make use of all that fantastic data for their internal use. And so you want to encourage them to be linking to it from their website as well. Now, the librarians and universities, we talked about that this is fantastic data for everyone in there. The important takeaway, the reason you want all of these people to link to you is that the more high quality traffic you drive to your site, the better your website will do overall in search rankings. These have to be credible, legitimate links. So anything with a .gov or .edu suffix in their website is particularly valuable. That's why we want to go after the government organizations who can benefit and the universities who can benefit. Anytime a media organization publishes a news or feature item, we really want to make sure that they correctly, hyperlink back to your website. Also really makes a big difference. So don't be shy to go back, especially if it's video or an audio file, like a radio station or local TV station. Google is not indexing the content of audio files and video files, so they need to have a link and description in the text that accompanies those online in order. And don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to chase them down and say, hey, can you add this in after a story is published? Really makes a difference. You will see that difference in your analytics very quickly once those things are published. Okay, so some of the things you want to think about also is how to be very tactical and creative in using content that can drive people back to your website. So one of the things that we introduced this past December that's really exploded is a very easy to build, drag and drop virtual tour software. You buy the software, it's a license for 1 year. You can build as many tours as you want. Each one would have a theme. And the idea is that each themed tour has as many stops as you actually want. And within there, you've got hyperlinks, video, text description, map tools, data, images, video, audio. And it's so easy to do. You don't need to outsource this to a marketing agency or a graphic designer. This is something that we built to make it as easy as possible for you to do individually. So here you have an image from the city of Grapevine. I'm just going to show you some different examples of how people have done this. So NISA in South Carolina has put together a Zoom tour that will take you through the region. Let me just click over to that. So let's take a look. This is the NISA tour. So you can see that there's an audio file. We have information here. They put a little image. And right over here, you see the different stops along our tour. It's kind of like those hop on, hop off buses that we used to do. Hopefully we'll go back to doing. And what you do as you progress through the tour over here is that you can see images, you get to see 360 view, you want to move around the area, learn more about it. We get to click over and look at some data. This draws from their GIS planning tools so we can learn more about the region. And it really gives us the opportunity to understand more about what we're actually seeing. It's really creative content. And these are self-guided tours. They've included hyperlinks over here and audio if you want to listen to them to help walk you through there. And there's all kinds of creative content that you could put in there that will help draw people around so that they can understand the lay of the land. It's really, really quite creative. We've got so many fantastic ways that our clients are using them. I'm just going to take you back over there so you can see for a moment what that looks like. Let's go back into our Prezi over here. So this is an example of what NISA has done, and I've put hyperlinks in here. So when I send you the slide deck, you'll be able to see and explore the different tours. The city of Abbotsford has put together a Zoom tour to attract film and video production. It's also kind of a neat walk up their main street, historic main street, and you get images and trailers of the different films and videos that were produced in the different areas. Yuma, Arizona has put together a profile of one of their target industries here, food processing sector. So it basically takes you through some of the most important anchor companies in that industry sector. You can click over to see the websites for the different companies, see images and video. This one was produced for Montgomery, Ohio, and it basically is a sites and buildings tour that takes you through some of the properties that they're featuring at the moment. There's all sorts of data, again, lots of content around this. Tourism is another thing that we're seeing people produce. So you can put, the top 5 restaurants around a conference center, or a walk through a historic district, or places of historical interest to people, or the top beaches in an area. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do. Really, we always say, let your imagination be their guide. So lots of cool things you can do, campus tours, some really interesting things coming out of that. Okay, I'm shifting gears here because I promised to give you lots of content and I want to keep an eye on the time. You want to drive more traffic to your tool? Let's think about using social media very strategically. That's one of the things I'm always going to look for when I'm doing a traffic analysis with my clients, is how are you driving traffic to your website? So recognize that if you are using interactive data tools, they are inexhaustible sources of great content. You can, at the beginning of a month, put together a social media calendar with fantastic examples that brings people back to your website. Now, let's think about putting your links to your website in prominent places. Now, Wikipedia is one of those things that's always going to come up in a Google search. And I always encourage people to edit the entry for your location with facts about economic development, about your organization. It's free. Anyone can do it. And so few people think of it. So here's an example here. I looked up a city in California, and Wikipedia is all, you can see the second entry over there. That happens all the time. So why not take advantage of this? All you need to do is go over to Wikipedia, create an account, log in, and then you can just be the one who edits. Now, the thing about Wikipedia is this is crowdsourced, right? That is the nature of a wiki. Someone else can come along and edit something that you put in there. So when it comes to economic development organization, what I usually suggest is stay away from anything that is blatantly self-promotional. Just give people the facts. That's what they want. So talk about your value proposition. These are the target industry sectors. These are the anchor companies. This is, data about our workforce, or about the businesses in our area, or this is the transportation or supply chain characteristics, and put links back to your website. Super easy, free, easy thing that everyone should make sure that they've done. Okay, let's now talk about actual social media. In every one of your accounts, now you may say to me, I don't have time to do social media. All I've got is LinkedIn, and that's good. If you're going to focus on just one because you don't have a lot of time, choose LinkedIn. That is where you are going to get the most actionable leads. If you have more than one, that's awesome. Just make sure that you are regularly using them, and that in the bio and description for your organization's LinkedIn profile or Facebook profile or Twitter bio or whatever you use, that you put the hyperlink back to your website. And don't be shy. You don't have to do just one. If you've got interactive data tools, put links back to those as well. That will help drive more traffic your way. So here's an example. You can see City of Abbotsford. This is on Twitter. They've got their website prominently placed up there on the top. I love that. That brings people back there. Jobs Ohio, they put their website prominently in their LinkedIn profile. Excellent. It's an easy thing to do, and it does actually make a difference, so it's definitely worth it. Now, if you are using video on a YouTube channel, it's fantastic. YouTube is a Google product, and you know what Google loves most of all? Google loves Google. So YouTube is just a great channel to use, but as I said earlier, Google cannot index video content. So if you're posting a video, make sure that with the video you have few lines of description, text description that goes along with it, that have important keywords, and put URLs, website links in the descriptions for every video you upload. It will make a difference. Now, the other thing you must insist upon if you are using interactive data tools is that they must have shareable links. These are going to bring prospects back to your website. So you want to look for those sharing options built into your website. If you're just sharing static PDFs, it's like what we call vampire creative. It is sending people back to nowhere. You need to have dynamic links because that's what brings people back there, so they continue doing research and analysis and answer the questions that they're actually looking for. All of our data tools have share links built directly into them. So whether it's a property report, whether it's a demographics report, a business report, a map, you want to make sure that you are bringing people directly back to the website. So important. Otherwise, you're losing leads without even knowing it. Now, when it comes to social strategy, think about what your resources are. If you do not have time to do more than one, then focus your energies on the one that's most likely to pay back for you. And I usually recommend LinkedIn. If your primary goal is energizing and connecting with your local business community, then Facebook is a good place to do that. Your local businesses are all on Facebook. If you're looking at attracting investments, that sort of thing, then I usually suggest going to LinkedIn. Make sure that all posts have a URL that goes back to key website pages. Again, we don't want to have all this creative content and then nowhere to send people. Mine your website for great content. So a property of the week, a featured, heat map showing how much money people are spending on food or women's clothing or shoes or books. And then take the time to set up a weekly or monthly calendar to schedule those posts ahead of time to make sure you've got regular content going out, and then go back to the analytics. And each of these social tools will have their own analytics as well as using your other ones that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, and determine, what got the most impressions, what are people most interested in. And consider using sponsored posts. I really like them on LinkedIn because you can be very finely targeted down to groups or specific companies for any big events, launches, or even as regular ways to draw traffic. Now, you can do the same kinds of things if you're using an email newsletter. I have a separate webinar directed just to turbocharging your e-newsletter, but a lot of this advice works well there too. Use the tools you have on your website to generate content and then include links. So important, so that they leave the newsletter and come back to your website. You'll notice if you take a look at the slide deck that I've got a link back to another webinar here as well on specific social media strategies for place marketing. So you can check out the video recording of that one as well. Some other examples that I just want to show you, just that I've seen different people use. So properties of the month, Detroit region, again, doing a feature property of the day. Just showcasing different tools. I love it when they use images. That really draws people's attention. North Florida EDP using some compelling content, beautiful images, and then links back, always the links back. Fayette, Georgia, using their Zoom business tool and putting the link in there as well, using a clever hashtag. Shop local is really important. You can create your own hashtag for your business. Promoting just the tools that you have, not even just the content, but letting people know that that's there. Make sure you check it out. This is just a really short video example of how Detroit Regional Partnership captured screen video from our 360 virtual tour for a specific property. This auto plays in LinkedIn. If you've got video, it will auto play. And I just thought that was really interesting because when you're scrolling through LinkedIn newsfeed, this is really attention getting. So the virtual tours that we put in for every single property, super easy to use something like Camtasia or Jing to capture the screen video from there and then add it in. And of course, we have clients adding their own custom virtual tours. That's something you can capture as well. Okay, so this brings me to the end of the webinar. Boy, I really just squeaked in here, and I know we're over time here, but I am going to just take a quick look at some questions because I do see that there are a number of questions here. Will this be shared after the presentation? Yes, absolutely. I will be sharing this. As I said, I'll be sending an email to all of you by tomorrow with a link back to this so you can share it with colleagues or review. And then to take a look at some of the other questions we've got here. Let's see what else we've got. I have good intentions about sharing on social media, but then things happen. Any tips on scheduling social media campaigns, analysis of traffic on a regular basis? Well, that is absolutely something that I understand. I know it can be very difficult. This is what I usually suggest at the beginning of the month. If you're one of those people who wears lots of different hats at your organization, and that includes the social posts, is take an hour at the beginning of the month and schedule fairly regular posts throughout the month and use the tools that you've got. It could be website pages, it could be content within your data tools, and just put them out there, because the more often you post, the more likely your organization's posts are going to be to show up in other people's news feeds. In other words, there's an algorithm there and they're looking for frequent posters. That makes a difference to whether people see you or not. Take the time at the beginning of the month to do that. Then during the workday, I usually suggest taking 10, 15 minutes at the beginning of the day. Set a timer if you need to, because we know there's no end to the internet. It's easy to go down that rabbit hole, and just go in there and take a look. How many impressions are you getting? How many links are you getting? Take a look at your analytics. How many people are clicking over? Look at your lead forensics, lead gen ID tool, and see what's working in there. And that way you can kind of pivot, make changes, do things a little bit differently if you want to. And then someone asks a question, should we think of using these tools differently for business retention, expansion versus business attraction? So I think I would go into the data tools that you've got and into the website content that you've got, and think about the content that people for those different personas would be most interested in seeing. So, and I gave you some examples of that. So you could look at the community data tab and capture some content from there, and then post that, and that'll get the kind of, you know, economic development, gardening, nurturing your existing businesses, making linkages between them, versus those that are maybe more interested in property or in looking at drive times and some of the other data that we've got in there. Do we provide, let's see, I've got all sorts of questions in here and I want to get through them without taking too much more of your time. Oh, my city's IT has control of the website. How can I convince them to deploy the data tools like Intelligence Component or Zoom Prospector? Well, you know, this is all about your strategy, your marketing and outreach strategy. I imagine that people are looking for this information. You're getting contacts saying, how can I find this? How can I find that? We know that the vast majority of site selection is happening online before they're contacting you. So you don't even know these prospects exist. And if you don't feature this data on your website, you're losing leads without even knowing you're in the running. So it is absolutely critical. The practice of economic development and investment attraction right now absolutely depends on having these kinds of interactive tools. So I think that's a really compelling case that you'll be able to make to them. You know, from our perspective, we work with all kinds of IT departments. We can embed your tool, we can set it up as a separate subdomain, we can link to it as a microsite. There's so many different ways to do that, and to keep it very affordable. So if you're interested in learning more, then feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to discuss that with you. And I will be, of course, emailing you, so you'll be able to get that information when I send that to you by tomorrow. So I believe that takes us to the end of today's session. I know we've gone a few minutes over. Thank you all for your patience. I'm happy to see everyone sticking around. I look forward to continuing this conversation. You can reach me at asklar@gisplanning.com, and I invite you to follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, and reach out when you get this email from us tomorrow. Thank you very much for all the work you do for your communities. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Goodbye.